Hi, everybody. Welcome to Marc Summers Unwraps. If you're a first-time listener, thanks for joining us. For those of you who have been with us for quite a long period of time, we thank you as well. If you're listening, I couldn't be happier. If you're watching, I apologize for the hair. It's raining here in Los Angeles, and I'm at that point where I have something important to do in about 10 days. So I try to back up the haircuts to when I have to be out of town. And so I kind of look like a chinchilla in heat today, so I apologize for that. I'm excited about our guest today for many, many reasons. In comedy, it's all about being original. And I always talk about when I became a regular at the Comedy Store back in 1976. And that was the time that Dave Letterman and Robin Williams were breaking through. And they exploded. And what we found soon after when they exploded, that there were copies already. People were trying to do Dave and emulate his style. A lot of people were trying to do Robin and, of course, couldn't come close. And being unique and being the ability to stand out is so difficult. Somebody who comes to mind often to me is Norm Macdonald. There was a uniqueness to him. And it's funny, if you go back and listen to Norm Macdonald in the early days, that voice inflection that he came up with didn't exist in the early days. That was something that he sort of grew into. Why he came up with that and how he came up with that, sadly, we'll not know now. But I always thought it was brilliant, and his point of view was funny as hell. The gentleman who we're going to talk to in just a few moments has that same uniqueness, and I can't wait to find out about how it came to be. If you're a regular viewer of The Daily Show, you're going to know him right away, not only as a host, but the pieces he does are brilliant. And I'm anxious to see his point of view because I almost like, he's a great host, but when he goes out in the field and does these things, it's mind-boggling to me. Say hello to my good friend here, Mr. Jordan Klepper. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, Mark, and you look great. I got to tell you, I think you nailed it. And I like to hear your thought process behind that as well. I was literally going through that today, knowing like I have to do something on camera in 5 days. I'm inherently cheap, but I'm attempting to balance when I pay for that haircut, when it's going to look its best, and how far I'm willing to go.
Wait a minute, you don't have somebody in makeup and hair at The Daily Show who cut your hair?
No, I have Kathleen, who is wonderful. She's been cutting my hair in Brooklyn for the last 15 years.
Oh my!
And The Daily Show is still cable television, so there's still no money. And they're like, you take care of any kind of hair care needs by yourself. You come to work, bring a suit, and maybe we'll give you lunch.
We might press it if it's wrinkled just a little bit, you know. So we need to talk about a bunch of stuff, and I want to find out. You know, when I was growing up, I was obsessed with talk shows and variety shows, and I would see stand-up comedians and comedy in general. And I, at an early age, knew what I wanted to do. Maybe I was 7 years old, believe it or not, knew I wanted to be on TV, knew I wanted to do stand-up. In my research, that's not the case with you. You didn't have this, oh my God, I've got to be on television, I want to be funny. You grew up in Kalamazoo, correct?
That's correct.
And went to college there. But you majored in, was it theater and math? Is that it?
Yeah, I got a math scholarship.
Oh, my.
And so I was a nerd who got a math scholarship, and I knew above all else I wanted free college. And so that was step one. And step two, I sort of gave myself an opening of like, I doubt I'm going to go into math, but let me give myself space to find something. And I did find performing. I think before that, I can't say... I didn't come out of the womb being like, I want to be on TV. I think part of that is I didn't know if like that was actually a real job opportunity.
Yeah, growing up in the Midwest, I always wondered, how the hell do you do that? How do you get on television? How does that whole thing work? So when was the turning point? When did you just say, I may have a desire to do this?
I think it was college. Oddly enough, like, and I've gotten to know you a little bit in the last couple of years, and like I've said, like I would watch you host. I would watch late night a little bit with as I got a little bit older, I'd watch a little bit of Letterman with my parents, and oddly enough, my mom's cousin is Tim Allen. My dad's college roommate is Tim Allen, and that's how they met. And so Home Improvement became a thing when I was really young. And so that was the first I suddenly saw. There's Uncle Tim, who I see on Thanksgivings, usually once or twice a year. Now he's on television. And so I kind of knew Tim's, as Uncle Tim. Tim was a stand-up. He'd come through town. That was always a fun, big deal to my parents to get to see him go to the State Theater in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and watch Tim go around. And then when Tim was on like a late night show with Jay Leno. That was a big deal. And just this idea that Tim could kind of connect to that world. So I started to close the gap between what somebody in Kalamazoo, Michigan thinks he can do and seeing somebody like Cousin Tim do something. That suddenly starts to make me think maybe this is a reality. But I don't think I seriously considered it until I jumped into and found the world of improv comedy in college, which sent me to Chicago. And those places suddenly had a real filling out of what a career in comedy could look like.
Did you ever talk to Uncle Tim and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this?
A little bit. We know what was interesting is, I walk my own route, and the improv world is different than the stand-up world. And I remember it was after college, I decided I was going to go to Chicago. I was going to follow in the footsteps of the Tina Feys, the Stephen Colberts, everybody who went to Second City. And that's what I loved. I loved improv. And Tim invited me. He was with us. He was doing a movie called, I believe it was called What Happened to Cletus Tout.
That one got by me, I guess, but
it got by a lot of people. I don't think a lot of folks went to go see that, but he invited me. He was like, if you're interested in this world, you can come up and see me. I've never been on a film set, never seen any of those things. And I went up there and was really generous with his time. And I got to see this, and it was mind-blowing to see how a movie got made. And I remember he was in a scene with Christian Slater and RuPaul. It was like, wow, what is this world? Yeah. I love it. But when I would talk to him about it, Tim was like, go to LA, become a stand-up. This is how you do it. And I was like, no, thank you. I'm going to go to Chicago and be an improviser. And I think he was, quite frankly, a little baffled by that. And so he was always somebody I could talk to when I would run. I would see him on a social level on Thanksgiving, and he would ask how things were going. But the improv and the sketch world was somewhat alien to him at the time. And, as I got older and realized, there's a quicker path to get it on television. It tends to run through places like Los Angeles and not 10 years in Chicago.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it is, stand-up is one thing. Improv is something entirely different. A couple of years back, somebody who was obsessed with Double Dare and whatever it is I did a improv theater thing in Chicago, and they invited me. And I flew to Chicago. I was living in New York at the time, and did it. And I sucked so bad at it, I can't even begin to tell you. Then I was asked to do a guest spot at Upright Citizens Brigade in New York. I said yes. I sucked at it. I was so bad, okay? It is so difficult to do. What was it about improv that drove you in that direction as opposed to doing stand-up?
You know what? I think it was community. It's a team-based sport, which I think was something I was drawn to as a kid. To play basketball, loved being on the tennis team. Even in tennis, I played doubles, so I always liked to share at least half of the court with somebody else. I grew up and I loved Whose Line Is It Anyway, and I would watch General Hospital with my mom after school, and then Whose Line Is It Anyway would come on, and she would tend to leave, and I would then watch Ryan Stiles and Colin Mockery be hilarious. And so when I go to college, they have an audition for an improv team, and I was like, this sounds fun. Let me try it. If I can get on, if I try it, and in 4 years I can do one show, that'll be a huge win and a success. What a fun thing. Well, I try it out, and I get on the team right away, and I'm like, this is great. It's exciting. It's playful. I love the camaraderie. But I was a nerd. Not that I did mock trial. I was a math kid, but there's a part of me that always loved performance. And I don't think I fully indulged it until that moment. And it unlocked something in my head beyond just the dopamine rush of somebody laughing at you, thinking that you're funny or talented. It's also sort of a way of looking at life that I hadn't been asked to contemplate. A mathematician walks into a room and you're immediately asked to answer, is this right? Is this wrong? Prove it. An improviser walks into the room and they're just like, how do you feel? Say yes to something. Be open to where it goes. And that was a mind fuck for me at the time. But it really opened up my brain where I was like, hey, you tell me I can't be wrong. In fact, all I can be is right. And all I can do is explore, and how I feel and how I build. Those are what's compelling to you. That I loved. And my college then sent me to England for 6 months. And I did foreign study over there. They kicked me out of small town Kalamazoo. And there I fall in love with British comedy and Monty Python. And I see some West End shows. I see The Real Thing with Tom Stoppard. And And suddenly I'm like, this world is exciting. It's playful. It's smart yet silly. It can make fun of the big guy up top with Monty Python. And I kind of come back just energized. And so when I graduate from college, I'm not. I wouldn't have told you, probably because I'm attempting to be humble and scared of failure, that I was going to be some person who could be on TV. And I earnestly didn't have anything else I liked nearly as much as exploring the world on stage. And Chicago was a hop, skip, and a jump just down the road. I had seen Second City with Keegan-Michael Key in Detroit, and it blew my mind.
Oh, they were touring, and you saw them?
The initial time I saw them, they toured to Kalamazoo, and I saw them, and I loved it. And then my parents took me to Detroit to see it. And I was like, I'd never seen this thing live. And it was Keegan-Michael Key, and he was so funny and incredible. And then I saw it in Chicago as well in college, because that was about a 2.5-hour drive, and it's Rachel Dratch just before she got picked up by SNL. And you go into that theater, both in Detroit and in Chicago, and that theater is just packed. It's sweaty and it's alive. And then Rachel Dratch comes out and she's playing these big, bold characters, and the whole audience can't help but just be alive with uproarious laughter. And I'm like, this is it's palpable. It's I love this, whatever it is. And so after college, I'm like, I don't know what that is. I don't know how to put my hand around it. But I think I'm going to go to Chicago. They've created a pathway where you can give them money and they'll teach you how to do this thing. So the institutionalized nature of improv comedy served a kid like me who needed a path and probably wasn't going to go to LA and just be like, I'll chart my own path.
Well, you mentioned some of the people who have come out of Second City. Explain the process about, first you pay them and they educate you. But how do you become a regular, and how long does that generally take?
Well, the world of Second City and the Improv Olympic has changed drastically in the internet age and what have you. When I got there, sort of what ended up happening, you immediately start taking classes at the Improv Olympic and Second City. And that's like I went through like 4 levels of classes, and then you get into a conservatory, which is almost like a 2-year program to take classes, build off one another. And at the same time, I'm taking classes at the Improv Olympic, which is teaching you just pure improvisation.
And how do they teach that? Explain that to me, because I am really so uneducated about how it all works.
This is what I ended up being a teacher for a good old 7 years.
Really?
And both in the comedy world, I taught young students. I taught 12-year-olds, some of which have gone on to be on TV. I taught scientists, working in physicists in Geneva, Switzerland, working on the Hadron Collider. What? And I've taught a bunch of comedians. Like it's the world's nicest pyramid scheme. It really is.
It sounds like it.
It's a really lovely pyramid scheme. We immediately teach people, though. Day one in Chicago, you have a handful of people want to be actors, a handful of people want to be comedians, but you also have firefighters, business folks, single parents who just want an experience. And day one, you teach them to let go of judgments, to say yes to ideas, and to just be open and listen. And so in doing that, there's a bunch of different structures for doing that, but really it is like, we're going to get silly as fast as we can. We're going to let go of any preconceived notions we have, of judgments of what other people do, judgments of what you do. We're really going to learn to just build off of what is happening right now in the room. So you start with a lot of things that are like linguistic patterns, a lot of physical theater stuff that really is based in, like Viola Spolin, sort of progenitor of all this. It's based in real theater work, which was new to a lot of people. It's theater work mixed with like listening work and a little bit of writing work. And after, a class or two, hopefully you're open enough that the fear of failure has been decreased because you've already done it 1,000 times. And then as you get more and more comfortable with that and the process of listening, building off of ideas, the process of learning failure, they start to like teach you structures for improvisation that helps you create larger shows. And the Improv Olympic is more theoretical, is more arty, and kind of, to me, more philosophical in a way that you're learning how to kind of like experience true theater. It's like sort of Steppenwolf based, where it's like, I want to feel something on stage. I want to build art. And then Second City, as you start to grow and learn about improv, it's a little bit more structured, like you're using improv to write. And traditionally a Second City show is like, you're going to improvise something. If it's good, we're going to re-improvise it. and then re-improvise it and re-improvise it until it becomes a sketch. So what you're using improv for is writing. And when you go see a Second City show, you're watching a show that's 2/3 something that has been refined on stage and 1/3 something that has been created in the moment. And when you're watching something at like an improv Olympic stage, you're watching something that's just the beauty of creation and failure.
I always wondered about that, of how much of it was semi-rehearsed and done a few times as opposed to just pure improv. You just gave me a great tutorial on all that. So was there a tremendous dropout rate, or at some point, I know they're paying to do it, but at some point do they come to people and go, you just don't have it, you should save your money?
You basically, every year, or every year and a half when I was there, they would have auditions for the touring company. And how that worked is there's a couple companies that tour the country, and they perform classic scenes from Second City and brand new improvisations. And usually they're letting on 2 to 5 people. And there's thousands of people who audition. And so everybody basically, it's one of the scariest days in Chicago. If you're an improviser, you're hoping you get the call to be one of those few people who get into it. And for somebody like myself, I auditioned year in and year out, and about year 4 or 5, I finally get the call to be on a touring company, and you're one of, like, at that point, you're one of like probably 12 to 15 people who get paid to tour the country doing Second City shows. And then there's another 2 stages with 6 people on each cast that are working full-time in Chicago. And so at that point, that's about all the, like, there's like at that time, there were 5,000 people improvising in Chicago, and there's probably 20 or so who are making a living doing that.
And you got turned down 3 times before you got to become a regular.
Yeah.
How were you making a living?
I arrived in Chicago, and I started substitute teaching at Chicago public schools.
Oh boy.
So I would teach kids during the day, and then go to every improv show I possibly could at night. And I did that for like 3-4 years. And then I kind of moved up enough as a nerd to start teaching people improv. And so I started teaching kids improv, and then started teaching adults improv. And so by and then when you're in the touring company, it's great. You travel around the country, and they pay you, I think, $70 a show.
Oh my.
So it's again the nicest pyramid scheme. The nicest pyramid scheme you could get. And so I'm coaching, I'm teaching, and I'm performing as much as I can. And then you hit a wall where if you really want to make money and have things like health insurance, you're waiting in line at Second City might not get you there.
And so I always, talk about the fact of you got to put in your time. And I used to have, I came out to LA right out of college. In fact, I didn't even go to my graduation. I got in a car before my graduation and drove out, okay? And supposedly had a job, and when I got there, of course, the job wasn't there. And the question always becomes, why do some people pursue it and other people say, you know what, this doesn't work and I'm going to go sell shoes? What do you think it was that motivated you to keep moving forward?
I don't think I had a plan B. And
some people say that's good, because if you have a plan B, you'll do it.
I think for me it was great. I can't say it was because I was some ballsy guy who said I'm going to make it this way or the highway. But I think I truly was listening to myself. I didn't want to do anything else, and I loved it. It made me it like the quest and the journey of it all was so compelling and interesting to me that I didn't have a secondary path. And also, I had parents that were fantastic. I wish I could tell you a story about fighting family members who were like, "Don't do it. You're throwing your life away." And in some ways, they would have been totally in the right to have said exactly that. When I was 27, making $100 a week with a math major in my back pocket and no health insurance, they were driving from Kalamazoo, Michigan, to Chicago to watch me perform for 100 people at the Improv Olympic, and they were supporting that day in and day out. And so I do look back at it, and I see where I was naive, but that was it only served me in the long run that I had enough confidence in what I was doing. I was a confident kid. I was getting good responses, and there was nothing else in the world that I liked more than the thing that I was doing. And I had no outside pressure from the people who raised me, who I loved dearly, to throw it away. Nobody made me feel stupid about my decisions up until that point. So I was able to still to follow these interests and dreams where they took me.
Were you living in Chicago in an apartment with 12 people, or what was that experience like?
I lived, I think, 7 places in Chicago, like each one slightly better than the one before it, sleeping on floors, with my improv teammates, 4 of them for a little while, with a girlfriend for a little while, you constantly roommates. And then finally, when I end up quit Second City. I kind of go as far as I can with Second City, and I don't get the final rung, which is on the final stage. But I do get a job on the Big Ten Network, hosting a travel show. And I also fall in love with my now wife, who I met traveling the country with.
Oh, wait a minute. So tell me about this travel show on the Big Ten Network. First of all, explain what the Big Ten Network is.
Oh, it's it. The Big Ten Network is a network that started, I guess, 15 years ago, that is just Big Ten college sports.
Based out of Chicago, I believe, correct?
Yes, exactly. And so it started up in 2000, I think, 8 or 9, and the whole idea was the Big Ten Network was going to cover predominantly football, and they had an idea that they wanted to do a Friday night show where essentially they would hire some comedians to go to campuses, do daily show type pieces, be funny, improvise things, and then do sort of live bits on television the night before the big game. And I auditioned for that, and like every audition I've literally ever gotten anywhere with, they asked me to improvise, and I was able to play off of what was happening. I came up with some fun stuff. I'm also a Michigan Wolverines fan, so I had some knowledge base there, and they hired me to essentially go to college campuses and do bits with mascots and cheerleaders and create TV on no budget with very little oversight. And it was a blast. I learned so much.
What were they paying you?
God, I mean, at the time it was an unbelievable amount, which was probably $2,000 a week to create to create like an hour of television.
I did a similar show. I did a pilot for Anheuser-Busch. This goes back, I don't know how many years ago, where we interviewed the guy who wipes the sweat off the floor at the Laker games and things like that, and did some mascot stuff. And Reggie Jackson had just been traded to the Los Angeles Angels. And so I went to interview him, and he didn't want to be interviewed. So he said the F word every 2 seconds. And he said, "I'm only doing this so you can't use it." And I said, "Oh, I'm going to use it." And I did. I set it up, and, of course, it was him just being edited to death. And he had, 3 words, and everything else was F this, F that, F that. And so we had complete, autonomy to whatever we wanted, so much so that Anheuser-Busch didn't pick up the show. But I had a ball doing that. That was, super cool.
It's so fun. You honestly, I was talking to famous alums who were old football players, or like Chris Hansen, who was like To Catch a Predator, was an alum of a Big Ten school. So I had to do a sit down comical interview with him. Like I loved it. It was so dynamic, and quite frankly, like it was sort of like pull yourself up your bootstraps TV, in the sense that it's like they needed content, and I didn't know how to make television. I had like young producers who were like, go out and come up with funny bits to do with the cheerleaders or whatever. We have to make 3 minutes out of it. So I'm throwing out wild ideas. We're filming stuff. I'm doing man on the street stuff, just trying to look for things that are compelling. We're giving notes on editing, and a lot of this industry, there's such big gatekeepers. You go anywhere on your TV at least a decade ago, usually you had no control over any of it. But I think for Friday Night Tailgate, they're like, we need this. It was literally, the network just began. They're like, we need to fill all of these hours. We have no other content. So if you can bullshit on a campus for somebody, we'll put it on TV.
But right place, right time. You got to put yourself in those situations. One of the most fun interviews I did is we interviewed the organ player at Anaheim Stadium, and I believe, if the story is right, I may be confusing with something else, that they traded organ players. The guy who was playing organ in Chicago for one of the teams was traded for the organ player in Anaheim, and it's like, really? I mean, it's amazing. And what's the audition for that? How many times can you play Take Me Out to the Ballgame? I don't know. But it was fun because you made it up as you went along. And you have to put yourself in that kind of situation. So now you're like early 30s when you say, I'm done with Chicago, I'm going to move to New York?
Yeah, essentially that. I did that show for 3 seasons, and I think at 30, I had I booked a couple. I got close on a sitcom pilot that I flew out to LA and I didn't get. I basically, I was like, I had a little bit of traction. I was like, I had some auditions and some callbacks. And then I booked a pilot for an MTV show from Chicago that filmed in New York. And I was like, all right, let's go there to film it. It was essentially a hybrid prank show and improv show. That was me and Moishe Kasher, who was a comedian, very funny guy. And the idea was like, we would have like they would do a weird stunt in the middle of Times Square, like some crazy weird thing where there would be like a giant fight that everybody would watch, and then we would show up and be like, all right, do you want to be on a game show where we're going to quiz you on the weird things that you just saw? So we would essentially like do an improvised game show based on a planned stunt in New York spaces.
So how much did they observe and what could they spit back? That was okay,
exactly.
Who produced that? Do you remember?
Like, yeah, it was. They called themselves M&M Productions. It was Mark Effman and Mark Farrell, who were guys who worked in the MTV world and Comedy Central world at the time. So they did a lot of like reality TV stuff, but also like MTV was playing around with a lot of the partially hosted stuff, and it was a blast and wild and felt kind of like Friday Night Tailgate in that it was like, we're still figuring out what this is, but it's a nice, fun, high concept thing. And so we did it, didn't go anywhere. But at that point, I'm like, I want to stay in New York. I like the New York energy. I've always kind of had a dream of being out here. And I don't think there's anything left for me in Chicago to explore. So
the thing that's cool, though, about what you just said is I was at MTV. I started at Nickelodeon in '86, and MTV and Nick were 1-1. And they would throw stuff against the wall on a constant level just to see if it worked. Nobody does that anymore. So you got the tail end of that, which is fantastic, you know. And to get into a room like that and just sort of make it up as you go along, and you may discover gold, you may not. But I don't think that exists anymore because the costs have become so outrageous that those opportunities are long gone. So that must have been so much fun. So go ahead.
I loved it. I think ended up working on and off different MTV and MTV2 shows over the next few years, like writing on shows that would become, with the production company, like reality shows, some shows that would become like panel shows. But there was a certain level where, like, you know, I think they lost some of their creative ways over those years, and all the purses, the purse strings got pulled up there. But there was a level of like, oh, we have funny people. We have formats that aren't overexposed right now, whether it's prank format, whether it's host format, whether it's sketch format. They kept trying to mix and match them in ways that were really fun to try to figure out.
I was producing a show for Nickelodeon called Don't Just Sit There. It was a kids' talk show. And a young gentleman by the name of Jon Stewart was doing a talk show for Comedy Central at the time. And it didn't last very long, but there was something magical about what he was doing. And you could see, okay, this guy's going to be around for a long time. But he got his feet wet in that. And, you know, that's how you learn. If you get those opportunities, and once again, those are fewer and far between. So now you're in New York. And your first job is what? After you do the MTV thing, and then it didn't work, right?
It doesn't work, and so I call up the Upright Citizens Brigade, and New York and Chicago are pretty separate in the worlds of the improv communities. You can't necessarily jump into one or the other.
Also, they're totally opposite as far as I'm concerned. I've done both, and they don't meet in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion.
They're a very different vibe, and I kind of knew that coming out here. But I had the theater owner of the Improv Olympics, Shauna Halpern, vouched for me at the Upright Citizens Brigade, which is like, hey, we really like Jordan, if he can be a part of stuff. And I came in pretty humble, like, I know that there's a big line to be a part of this, but I know how to teach improv if there's any interest. And I hit at a time where there was a real creative interest in New York on what they were doing in Chicago. And so they sort of said, like, hey, we're not going to let you perform at our theater because you have to wait in line for this. But if you want to teach an advanced class for anybody who wants to learn what Chicago improv looks like, we'll give you that spot. And so I started teaching essentially Chicago-style long-form improv with whatever sort of things I was most curious about, which were, again, more artistic, more like long-form theater pieces. And there was a real appetite for that in New York at the time. And so students kind of flocked to it. And so I immediately started teaching a bunch of classes with my Chicago style at a place that was Well, I made a lot of friends fast at UCB. It was a great time to be in New York at 2009, 2010.
What were they paying you to teach those classes?
Boy, I mean, again, not a lot. I want to say it was a few $100.
So how'd you make a living in New York? It's not cheap.
And then that I was, you know, as an improv teacher, you make a few $100 teaching, and then you coach. And how you coach an improv is basically you coach a team, and everybody would pay you $5, and you hope everybody would show up.
Oh my!
And so hopefully all 9 people show up, and you make $45. And again, and this is, I mean, New York's expensive, but and I look back and I'm like, I don't know how I made ends meet, but I lived in a really cheap apartment in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, with my wife who was doing the same thing. You get occasional windfalls, like I'd occasionally get a call from Second City to do an improv thing in the business world, and I fly out somewhere and do something for a bunch of rich people who want to laugh kind of at their cocktail hour, and you do something that's a little demoralizing.
They don't pay attention. I've done those gigs, man. I was doing a shoe convention once. Mitzi Shore calls me. I'm at the Comedy Store, and it was 1979 or something, and I didn't have any money. And she offered me $300 to go in and entertain the National Shoe Convention down at the Shoe Marts in downtown L.A. And so all these guys are doing is talking about the styles for 1980 and how the wingtips are going to be different and the heels are going to, you know, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the comedy of Marc Summers. And the louder I get, the louder they got, okay? And finally, I took the microphone and I yelled, "Shut the F up," okay? Total silence for about 3 seconds. They looked at me, and then they just went back to what they were doing. Yeah. And I called Mitzi on the way home, and I said, "Mitzi, I bombed. I bombed so bad, you don't even have to pay me." And she said, no, I'll pay you, and I'll get a report. And the next day they said I did a great job. I didn't do anything. No, nobody was listening to me. But, you know, you subjected. The best job I ever had, I swear to God this is true, I got paid $5,000 to put on a tuxedo and go to this high-end event in a fancy hotel in downtown Los Angeles and say, "Ladies and gentlemen, Crystal Gale." And I walked off stage. It's like the best gig I ever had in my entire life. That's all I had to do, you know? Oh. And so every now and then some great thing will, you know, sneak through and they'll pay you an insane amount of money to do something stupid because they have too much money. How did the Comedy Central Daily Show come about?
Well, so myself and my wife are hustling in New York for a few years and getting close to stuff. I'm writing at MTV shows. My wife is teaching. She got flown out to in Chicago. She tested for Lorne Michaels for SNL. Don't get it. So the story I'll let everyone, you get close, but you keep moving on because you don't quite get there. And we get engaged honestly on a corporate improv gig where they paid me to go work for Radio Shack doing improv comedy at the Tour de France. And so, I do that. I fly my wife out and I propose to her. And instead of planning a wedding, because that was so overwhelming, we decided to make a web series about wedding planning and what have you. So we write some videos, we film them ourselves, we put them out there. And lo and behold, John Oliver steps down from The Daily Show and they have all this space. And they don't have spaces open very often on The Daily Show. People stick to this job for quite some time. Oh, yeah. So there's space, and they start looking for somebody. It takes them a long time to fill it in. And the producer at the show sees this video, and they're like, "Oh, actually, we like these two people. Actually, they're really interesting. Maybe they would fit." And so they asked both my wife and myself to submit a tape for The Daily Show, and that involves putting yourself on tape, reading a piece that The Daily Show has done before, but also writing your own piece. Quite frankly, after having been in Second City and improv for such a long time, I knew how to write these pieces. I wasn't great at a lot of things, but I was I know this voice. I understand. Second City teaches you how to write from the satirical point of view. Let's do it. So I send in my audition. They like it. I get to the next level, and I think I send in another one. They're like, "Can you put it on tape with your wife?" Because at that time, Jason Jones and Sam B were also on The Daily Show, and they sometimes like to play off one another. So we both send in tapes. They like that as well. And they're like, "Oh, you're at the final level." The final level means you're going to write another thing really fast. We're going to give you what to write about, and you're going to come in a couple days. and it's going to be you and your wife. And you're going to go read with John. We come in the day. It's me and my wife, and Nate Brigazzi is the other guy they asked to come in and read that
Whatever
day.
happened to him, huh?
No, I got to best wishes, man. I hope you're doing okay out there. We come in, and my wife and I are both stressed. Literally, we were thinking a month before this audition came around, we were like, are we done in New York? We've done okay here, but maybe it's time to go to LA. Maybe it's time to consider other things. This comes, we prep for it. We come to the Daily Show. They sort of loose interview you beforehand to get a sense with the field producers if you're any good out in the field or if you like politics and things of that nature. And then you walk in there, and I walk in, and I do my piece with Jon Stewart. And I will say you're always nervous. It's good to be nervous. Oh, yeah. But at that point, I'm 34. I've been doing this for 15 years.
That was how old I was when I got Double Dare, 34.
Is that right? There you go. It's a good year. I'm nervous, but I'm confident. I was like, you know what? I actually know what I'm doing in this. And I've been in enough little rooms like this to sort of understand the assignment, which is partially to fucking act like you don't need the job or want the job. And to also make everybody feel comfortable in that space. Mm-hmm. And so Jon Stewart comes on out and I immediately start doing bits with him. Not that I'm not reverent or humble around Jon Stewart. He's one of my idols. But I know he doesn't need me to kiss his ass. He needs somebody who's funny that he can work with. And so we do some bits. We sit down, we do our piece, and Jon starts going off-prompter, which, again, is an invitation for me to improvise as well. It's the thing I do best. And so we're suddenly playing. We have a good time. We joke around. We end it. I walk off thinking, fuck, I think that was it. I don't feel that very often. I've done it for a long time. I'm like, I tell myself, that was good. Maybe I got it. This one I was like, you know what? That was good. That really was what I wanted to do. And I leave that space. My wife does the audition as well. She feels good. Not as good as me, but still pretty good. And we're like, you know what? Let's leave here. Let's go get like a nice lunch. Who knows what the world has in store for us? Maybe our lives could change. Maybe not. But let's go just celebrate that we got this far. And as we're going home, my wife gets a call from our shared manager who says, you didn't get the job, Jordan did. And in that moment, she's wrecked and happy for me. I'm excited and heartbroken for her.
Yeah, I bet.
And I look back on that day, and that day changed my life. I was so excited to get that job. But it sort of encapsulates to me what this frickin' industry is, which is for every job.
What was it, 10 years ago now?
Yeah, 10 years. 2014. And so we got divorced a month later.
No, you didn't.
I'm kidding. We still love each other. We have a lovely crowd at our home.
Is your wife still doing improv?
She's not right now. She continued doing. She's still a writer. She's a bass player at home. A fun element there too is, she kept hustling, and then when I got my own late night show after the Daily Show, she was on it as a correspondent as well.
Nice.
And so we got to work together again 4 years later, which was sort of a nice way to reestablish that.
I can't compare you. You recently did an interview with a friend of mine, Dan Cashman, in Minneapolis, yes. And I called him the other day, and I said, I'm writing the segment to do with Jordan. I can't compare him to anybody. When you think about Robin Williams, you think about Jonathan Winters, and, Letterman loved Johnny, and, there's certain things that you can pick out. Carson did bits and pieces of Jonathan Winters and Jack Benny and all these things. I don't know how would you describe what you do? Because there's nobody on TV who comes close to anything that you do. And now I understand. I always wondered when I watch these segments that you do, how in the hell can you think on your feet so quickly and make people who are totally idiots, in my opinion, not feel horrible about themselves. They don't even know that they're being goofed on. That's how smart you are. And that obviously comes from the improv. But how would you describe your job?
Well, say the man on the street stuff that I do, which I love.
It's brilliant.
Like that to me is improv at its core.
Amazing.
I'm improvising with an unwilling scene partner, essentially. And I think at times, I initially started doing that on the street and thinking of it as sort of as improv and also as hosting and curiosity. Now I do feel more like an anthropologist where I do go out there with a curiosity or like a product tester for propaganda, sort of my MO now. And it is, because it is like, oh, I'm looking for comedy. I'm looking for hypocrisy. I have ways in which I know how to search for that, and it involves a great team. Like before I walk out of the door with the Daily Show stuff, I'm meeting with my producer. We're usually talking about, like, we almost call it debate prep, where we are talking about, like, what are the issues that we think people are talking about at a rally or at an event. And we start talking about where we see hypocrisy, things we think are funny, things we think they might care about. And so I'm having like conversations and thinking through kind of the logic of anybody's argument there. And so when I go out into the field, like improvisers do, you leave all that behind and you stay as open as you can to what is truly curious. And that's, I think, what also just a good host does, is you have to be open to what is happening in that moment.
And you have to listen.
You may have your agenda or your responsibility, but you also have a responsibility to that moment. And all of the great things happen in that surprise of that moment. And so that's sort of my MO, is what I'm looking for. I have ways in which to prep and be prepared, so I'm ready when something curious and ridiculous happens, because even if somebody is revealing something, it usually doesn't make TV unless I'm funny on top of it. And so you have to be ready to sort of contextualize it for your audience. And yeah, I mean, I think I entered into this thing as a comedian, and it's nice of you to say, like, but I think the Daily Show has had such lovely people who have been so good at this. Steve Carell was so good at this. Stephen Colbert was so good at this, and I loved what those Men on the Streets were. I think the world exploded when Donald Trump came to office. And also, I will say, the role of that changed. Like, even Trevor Noah came in and was sort of like, you go do your thing. And we had more freedom to just be like in the old days, you'd have one thing that you were looking to get from a man on the street. And in the Donald Trump era, it was like, we don't even know what's happening out there. Go and you figure it out. And so to me, that's where, like, I started reading Hunter S. Thompson books to be like, oh, this feels half like, it just feels like half Daily Show comedy and half like Gonzo, where like you're throwing comedy at an absurd situation, and in some ways, it's both feels fictional and yet more real than anything else because it is so comical. And so to me, what we do now sort of lives in this funny, weird world.
There's two ways to get releases. You can either hold up this sign and the camera takes a picture of it, and it, that way people don't have to sign the releases. But do you have people actually sign the releases after they're on?
Every single person, if you see their face, they have been given a release and they sign their name on their release.
Because they want to be on TV for 2 minutes? I mean,
yeah.
Do they realize how ridiculous they look? Apparently they don't.
I mean, it's a combination of a few things. One, people want to be on TV.
Yeah.
They feel right about their point of view. Sometimes they don't know what our show is. Sometimes they do know what our show is, and that brings them to be like, I want to go get in it with this guy. And I would say 10 years ago, before the MAGA world, I think there was a shared understanding of hypocrisy or shame or embarrassment. I run into people now who I've talked to who their pieces have aired on the show and seem full of hypocrisy and hilarity, that I run to again at events, and they're like, "Oh man, can I talk to you again? I love that piece." And I think that's the strange time we live in, where it does feel like separate versions of reality and of shame. I think of like when Donald Trump started to run, that first conspiracy theory that Barack Obama was a secret Muslim, not born in the U.S. That was racist, and people didn't want to say that on camera. And so if you were asking people if Barack Obama was born in the United States, almost every single person, maybe 1 out of 10, would admit that they think Barack Obama is not American. But 2015, baseline, that was an embarrassing thing to say if a camera was put in your face. Fast forward 6 months, 9 out of 10 people happily say that thing. And so they'd be proud to go on television and claim that Barack Obama is not an American. And that shift in what is shame and a baseline understanding of what is embarrassing on The Daily Show, that has completely changed in 2025.
But now that people who know who you are, do you get hassled? Get out of our way, you're the fake news kind of stuff? Or do they flock to you because they want to be on television?
Both.
There
are people who make it their mission that day to try to interrupt us and be angry with us. And then there's other people who are flocking to us really want to get our attention. We went to CPAC last year, which is the Conservative Political Action Committee, and it's a little bit more buttoned up than a traditional MAGA rally. I think that party is the party of MAGA now, but it's where conservative politicians go, members of media go, what have you. And we got a press credential, and we were going to do some interviews, and we were really prepped, to be honest, to not get any interviews. I was like, I think I'm going to walk in there, people are going to know who I am, and they're not going to want to talk to me. And a lot of these are politicians, and they're not going to want anything to do with me. I walked in there, and I couldn't have been more popular. And it was a mix of, it was a mix of people who are so in the MAGA world that they were just excited to see somebody involved in it. Like there was an 18-year-old kid who was a super Trump fan who wanted nothing more than to talk to me because it was wrestling to him, and I was the heel, and so he just wanted to talk to the heel. And then there were young Republicans who were running for small spots, small races, who were dying to talk to me because they saw Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert. They were walking around CPAC, and they had 10 other media outlets following them, hanging on their every word. And they had these young Republicans who are dying for any kind of attention. And so they're coming to me, handing my producer their card. Like, if you ever want to talk about anything, we will talk.
They want the exposure.
It's exposure. And that's where, it blows my mind. But when people wonder, but no one would ever dare talk to you, it's like people want that attention. They need that exposure.
And is there one that stands out in your mind that was just, it couldn't go on TV or was so outrageous? I mean, was there one moment that was like, I can't believe this happened?
I had a moment that happened off camera where a man who dresses in a brick suit, he's called Brick Suit Guy. He has a handlebar mustache, and he dresses as Trump's brick wall. And he often is invited up on stage by Donald Trump to look at Brick Suit Guy. He heckled us at Green Bay, Wisconsin. He heckled us all day. He called us fake news. He was angry at us, and because we were talking to people, he made it his mission just try to disrupt our entire shoot. And it was a hellish day. And then we get snowed in, and we all have to take different flights to the airport the next day. And I show up at the Green Bay airport alone, and there's Brick Suit Guy. And I spent 3.5 hours talking to Brick Suit Guy.
Come on, seriously? Was he a nice guy?
He was lovely. And we literally, as we talked, people came up, they recognized me, they asked for selfies, and he took pictures of me with them.
Oh my God.
And it was fascinating because once we removed the threat of being canceled or embarrassed, there were no cameras. I could ask him, I was like, let's talk about this stuff right now. And he was vulnerable. He was not as steadfast as he would be at a Trump rally. He talked about the things he didn't like about Donald Trump, the missteps he thought Donald Trump had. He was a libertarian at heart who loved to be sort of a troll on the internet. He saw himself sort of as a comedian who loved to get on Reddit and pass around memes, and that he felt like was a way that he could be both a comedian and sort of an advocate. He was a history buff. And we talked literally 3.5 hours. We didn't change each other's minds, but I think we understood each other.
Yeah.
We liked each other.
That's way cool.
We got somewhere, and as I'm walking up to to get on the plane, we're talking all the way up there. I give my ticket to the ticket taker, and I'm in an emergency exit row, and she says, "Do you accept the responsibilities in case of an accident?" I was like, "I do." And I turned to Brick Suit Guy, and I go, "I hope this freaks you the fuck out, man. It should work." And he laughs. And that to me that's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is he wasn't offended. He didn't take up arms because how dare I make fun of him there. He saw the humor in it. And I think that to me was like, oh, there's this softening word. We can laugh about some of these things. We're not going to agree on this stuff. But there's man that most people on the left probably see and are like, well, that's just one of Trump's crazies.
Yeah.
No, it's not. What you need to grapple with is that is a person who believes some crazy things, but it's not a crazy person. He's drawn in by the tribalism. He's drawn in by the camaraderie. He feels like he has a place. He definitely has a community there. He's like the history buff uncle that you have that won't shut up at Thanksgiving. But he's a person you can talk to. You can't do it with cameras around, though, because that's too much of a performance.
Well, he becomes a different person.
He's a different person,
Wow.
Yes.
So,
and not an inauthentic one. I wouldn't say that he's putting on a role, but I almost think with modern media, we all put on a role. And so when people yearn for who are these Trump folks, or who are these, everybody's so outrageous. It's like media wants to see that, and people are performing for that. And so there are some softening moments where you connect to people, but they almost always happen off camera.
Would you agree that without the improv background, you could never do what you're doing?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. It's in my core as sort of, in some ways, my own philosophy towards life, to be open, to listen, and to build. Like it kind of shaped me. And when it comes to hosting a show like The Daily Show and going out on the road, you have to listen and you have to be open. You have to be open to fail. When you do a show every single night too, you gotta let some go. And I often say, like, even creating a show, when I'm writing and hosting, the first half of the day, you're an improviser. You have to brainstorm. You're creating a show out of nothing, so you got to say yes to all of the ideas. You got to build as many ideas as you can on the table. Second half of the day, you're a stand-up, because you have to edit, pull these things, make it sharper, things that don't work, throw out as fast as you can. So I think you have to have both mindsets. But at my core, I think the things that make me good at my job, they tend to lie in improv.
What do you prefer doing, hosting The Daily Show or doing your field pieces?
As fun as it is to be out in the world, I do love to be out there. I got to tell you, it's pretty nice to put on a $3,000 suit and go into an air-conditioned studio with an audience that's prepared to laugh at your jokes. That's pretty nice.
It's a hot audience. I saw you a couple months ago, and boy, they're just ready to go. It's fantastic. So you look up to Trevor Noah, who I think is really good. I saw him do a stand-up thing. I was working on a thing called Clusterfest in San Francisco, and he was one of the headliners, as was John. Both brilliant. And you like Colbert as well as a sort of a influencer of types to your career, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, functionally, Colbert, Carell, when I started taking classes, when I started touring with Second City, we would do Stephen Colbert scenes, Steve Carell scenes, Tina Fey scenes. So I literally would study. Like, I'm a nerd to this stuff. I love comedy history, and part of what was fun about that stuff in Chicago is you'd literally watch old tapes and you'd study the ways in which they did things and the ways in which they would write scenes. Adam McKay would write a bunch of scenes, and you'd study those scenes and see how he'd wrap his head around it. And
is there an old school comic that you can think of that you said, boy, I wish I knew him, or I wish I met him back in the day?
Oh, I love Groucho Marx. I love the pattern and the rhythm of Marx. Yeah. And so I think I found him just outside of college. And then a lot of the British folks were my heroes. I love Python, Cleese and Palin were just some of my all-time favorites. And then I fell in love with like Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon, like that scene out of England were classic. And then Nichols and May, sort of that original Chicago like patter. Like I loved just how smart it was. I think that was part of it too. As you live in comedy, the people are able to be both so funny and so smart at the same time. That to me is the real sweet spot.
I was a page at CBS Television City, and I worked on the AFI dinner, the salute to Jimmy Cagney, and I sat Groucho Marx that night, and it was like the thrill of my life. It was just the most insane thing that I was standing next to friggin' Groucho Marx. He was there with some 12-year-old girl, of course, but I didn't know what to say. It was one of those, humana moments, because you're standing, next to royalty. It's just crazy. So you got an award, the Walter Cronkite Award. Did you even know who Walter Cronkite was?
Well, of course I knew who Walter Cronkite was, right? I think you were a third president, is that right?
Well, you're so young, and I was at an AFI dinner. Not an AFI dinner, something for the motion picture. Anyway, it was in Queens for Robin Williams, and Cronkite was standing there, and I had to go up and I introduced myself, and he was the nicest man you'd ever. I grew up watching this guy on CBS, and there he was, and he couldn't have been kinder and sweeter. And back in the day, I wish we had cell phones. I would have taken pictures with him, but unfortunately, it wasn't. It was a long time ago. But this guy was Mr. Journalism, so to get that award must have been pretty darn cool.
Well, or definitely a lessening in qualifications for these awards. I think the fact that they're passing this out to comedians shows us just how dire our journalistic endeavors are right now.
You've done your share of podcasting. You did some stuff with Governor John Kasich, and you did some stuff with Neil deGrasse Tyson. Tell me what that experience was like.
That was fun. Governor Kasich and I got put together to try to do a podcast was kind of find some common ground, talk about some cultural stuff, and it was really fun to have conversations with the governor. I don't know if anybody listened
I
to
did.
it.
I listened to some of those. They were interesting. Yeah.
The governor was a blast to talk to. I would say, it's interesting. He's a politician, and so he's always like, it was really fun when you engage with somebody like that. I became, friendly with the governor. That like when you're a governor of a state, you think that people are always at your beck and call. And so I would get phone calls from him in like the middle of the night where he's like getting his oil changed. And he was like, Jordan, I had a thought. And I'm just like, he just is used to picking up a phone and be like, give me somebody so I can tell them what I'm thinking. So I'm all these lovely, strange conversations where the governor's like, I'm on a break at the mall and just like, I'm going to tell you this thing right now. So it was really lovely to get to know him. And then Neil, doing stuff with Neil every now and then is a blast because Star Talk is so fun. And again, the nerdingly, I love comedy. I love nerding out about comedy. But whenever I have an opportunity also to expand on that and talk politics or talk science, talk math, like I feel like a kid in a candy store getting to talk to some of these really smart folks.
What was your TED Talk about?
My TED Talk was about certainty. They kind of came to me, and I love that challenge. They were like, what do you want to talk about? I'm like, I don't know, but I could do it for 8 minutes, maybe not 20. Let's talk about an 8-minute TED Talk. And what had been rolling around in my head a lot after going to so many Trump rallies, and frankly, having an interaction at a kid's birthday party with somebody who I found infuriating. And I believe we were talking about what was happening in the Middle East. And I left the kid's birthday party. I was like, I was so turned off by that conversation. It didn't have anything to even do with the politics. And I realized what I had to do with was their certainty in the situation. And I was like, right. I think I have a hard time connecting to human beings who don't admit some failure or some fear or some anxiety or some uncertainty, especially around this modern political moment. And when they're asking me to kind of put together this TED Talk about like how you find this common ground, this was even before meeting with Brick Suit Guy, but it was sort of about that idea. Like the only time I actually find it, it's not through my field pieces or my man on the street pieces. Those are looking for hypocrisy and the death of American democracy. But the actual moments of coming together, connecting, it comes in these moments of uncertainty and being okay to be open with your own failure and the things that you don't know. And quite frankly, it's the only way I think we often connect as humans. It's not like constantly trying to impress each other with the things that we've done with our own Instagram feed of like, I can do this, and these are the things that I know for certain. The people that I'm still friends with and care about are like, this is how I suck. These are the things I still haven't figured out. And I think I know this much, but want to know that much more. Like that to me is that almost perfect human, at least that perfect person to talk to.
You can learn from everybody, and you got to be open enough, to think that way. But most people, unfortunately, don't. So now that you're a big-time celeb, after putting in 20 years to get there, you recently spoke at Harvard. Tell me about that experience.
They invited me to have a conversation with a dean up there, and quite frankly, in this new year, I've done some stand-up shows, and I kind of wanted to strip some of that away and just start talking to people. And so an insight that I got from some of the professors there at Harvard was that the most recent Harvard class and some of the more last couple of years, they're really having a hard time being open in classrooms. They're having a hard time sharing their point of view or working through ideas because they're afraid of being wrong, because they're afraid of being canceled. They're afraid of their ideas being misunderstood.
Is that from the administration dictating that?
I know. I believe, from my understanding of it, was that students were frustrated about this, and they had articulated this was an issue they were having a few years ago, and so they created a council to try to help that. Then I think some of the protests that have taken place on campus have sort of exacerbated this fear. And I think it exists on some of these college campuses that people are afraid of speaking their mind, and it sounds like that's happening in classrooms as well, because whether they're afraid somebody's going to videotape something and cancel them, or that there's conversations happening, or that they're inarticulate in a way that they can't think through something, they have to already be fully formed, which to me sounds like a nightmare, to have to go to college and feel like you have to be fully formed with the way you see the world. Yeah. So I think the intention with the folks at Harvard been bringing me in was to kind of speak to what we've been talking about here, is how do you use lessons of improv, lessons of uncertainty to kind of create a space where people can be open, broken, and vulnerable and kind of connect and make dick jokes. That's sort of what I have to do. And so I made dick jokes throughout. That's sort of...
You got to do that, man.
You got to do that. I'm not an academic. I'm a math major who did 100,000 years of improv, so I have to do some dick jokes. But attempting to try to connect to some of these students to let them know that there's a space to have important conversations. I think that does lie in uncertainty and kind of admitting the things you don't know.
Did you do Q&A with the students?
I did.
And what
they are?
Was that interesting?
That is. I mean, they were lovely. I've been doing some Q&As. They were very articulate.
Yeah.
Thoughtful. Some of them went over my head. I blame them. I mean, this is where I'm like, oh, don't come at me, 21-year-old. You're coming at me? Okay. Well, the good news is I can think fast and make a dick joke faster than you, so I can still dodge it with that. But yeah, there's definitely an emotional and articulate class base there that wanted some questions, and I kind of welcomed it.
I spoke at Stanford, and these kids knew more about me than I knew about me, and they scared the living hell out of me because they did such research, and this one person pulled up a fact that like nobody knows, and my parents wouldn't know, and I was like, how the hell? You know, but that's why they're at Stanford. That's why they're at Harvard. They're smarter than the average bear. So when you do stand-up, what's that like? Do you show clips from things you've done on the Daily Show? Do you do Q&A? What do you do? An hour?
I'm morphed it. I started out, a benefit of being on TV is people suddenly want to come see your live shows, and so it was after the Daily Show. I was like, I've wanted to try stand-up. Let me start doing that. And I was doing some traditional stand-up. I toured for a while, and I had a big tour planned right before the pandemic hit. And that was traditional stand-up, me doing a 45-minute set, political inspired, but also life inspired stand-up comedy. And I enjoyed it. I don't think I could see what made a great stand-up and where I was, and I appreciated it, but I knew I wasn't going to quite get there with the time and the life that I had. And during the pandemic, I just started writing and telling more stories, and quite frankly, really liked the medium of storytelling more than I liked the medium of stand-up. And I kind of put together a show that was more of a storytelling show about my experiences with the Daily Show, some of the people I've interviewed, politics growing up, some philosophical ideas that I have, with like a TED Talk presentation of things that I've seen and also some comedy bits based around it. And then when the pandemic ended, I basically was like, all right, let's go put this out in the world. And that has been really fun. It's away from stand-up clubs. I was like, I appreciate what this is, but I would go and do stand-up clubs, and half the audience would want nothing but politics, and the other half would be mad that I talked about politics. And so for this round, it was like, I just want people who know what they're getting. I want to be able to have like kind of articulate conversations about these experiences. I'm going to talk about politics. I'm going to be opinionated here. I'm going to give you some big stories about my life and perhaps some thoughts as ways to move forward. And if you're in it to win it, we're going to put it at theaters and kind of make it a bit more of a theatrical vibe. And so that was a show called Suffering Fools that I just wrapped up, and really, really enjoyed kind of getting out there and trying to make that theater.
Yeah, I learned quickly when I was doing the Comedy Store that I didn't have what those superstar comics did. And that's sort of what led me into hosting. I was good at being Marc Summers. I just wasn't good at, getting up and saying two Jews go in a bar. I mean, I didn't have the proper material, and I tried to write stuff, and then I paid guys to write stuff. But whatever it was, I didn't have. And I recognize that. They used to call me the accountant comedian. I was 23, 24 years old. I had just become a regular. I wore a suit and tie when I'd go on stage. At the time, everybody was wearing Hawaiian shirts and stuff. And they would call me the accountant comedian because I would show up, do my, 8 minutes, and then I'd go home to my wife. And I wasn't hanging out till 3 a.m. with all the guys, doing what it was they were doing. And it wasn't my lifestyle. It wasn't good for me, but I found, as you did, the niche that was great for you. Here's the question. Are you really a Knicks fan? Because I saw you in the front row there this past weekend. I've sat in that seat, by the way. That's super cool.
That's a lovely
Isn't
seat.
it?
That's a lovely
They
seat.
sweat
Oh
on you,
God.
man. It's fantastic.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It spoils you for the rest of your life. You get the courtside seats, and you're like, oh my God, I could experience this sporting event like this.
It's amazing.
You know what? This might be sacrilegious, but forget it. I'm old enough where I am a Knicks and a Brooklyn Nets fan. I live by the Brooklyn Nets.
Okay.
They came here when I moved to New York. I share some season tickets with friends, but I also love the Knicks, and I pay taxes in New York. And so people come at me and they're like, you got to pick one. I'm like, you know what? No way. I'm going to whichever one gives me the best seats. I will go there and I will cheer for them. And if one is winning and it can bring me joy, I will find that joy. I will love it. And frankly, in this weird political climate, I've always liked basketball. I like all sports. Basketball has been fun. The last couple of years, the NBA, I've just fallen in love with.
Nice.
And now the world is so on fire. I go home and I go to my NBA TV and I'm just like, I'm not watching the news tonight. I am watching basketball. I'm just watching people who can excel in this beautiful sport with fun personalities. And so I've been very grateful to Jalen Brunson and the lovely players of the NBA.
What's the one thing, I mean, you're kicking ass right now and you're doing so good career-wise. What's the one thing that you'd like to do that you haven't had the opportunity yet? I mean, you've hosted a lot of shows and you've had a lot of great opportunities and you keep, moving forward and going up. But what's the one thing you'd like to do that hasn't happened?
A nude scene. Like that.
All right, I think we're out of time now.
Yeah, this is lovely. I got it in my head, Mark. So transferring the mood scene, and it's not playing for comedy. It laughs. No,
maybe you can go to an award show with Kanye. That would be fantastic, you know.
I don't know what people would do with that, but I'm ready for it. I've done a couple push-ups in the last 3 months. I think it's what the people want to see.
You know, the way we met, I every now and then I get to pull the Marc Summers card where I go to social media and I say, hey, you may remember me from these shows I did, and I'm a big fan. And I found you on social media, and I said, will you go to lunch with me? And we went out to lunch in New York, and we've been hanging out and talking ever since. I knew you were smart, but in talking to you here, you're smarter than the average bear times 10. You're so darn good. I mean, obviously you read a lot, and that's important. But the key to all these people in our world who are hosts is listening. And you have to listen even more because of when you're doing the field pieces, but you've been able to adapt what you've done in the field pieces and use it in studio when you're hosting. You're so brilliant at what you do. I can't thank you enough. I wish you continued success. And next time in New York, we will have lunch again. And if you get out here, give me a call.
Oh, 100%. Mark, you are the GOAT, my friend. I said it before. I will say it again. You're on the Rushmore. And I think it is absolutely. Every time I tell somebody, I brag about it. When I get to go out to lunch with you or get to hop on a podcast or see you and say, oh, yeah, I'm going to go talk to Marc Summers. It's I definitely use that Hollywood card. So thanks for giving it to me.
My pleasure. Jordan Klepper, watch him on Daily Show and everything else that he's on. Marc Summers Unwraps continues. We'll see you next week. Take care. Marc Summers Unwraps is a production of Believe Limited, created by me, Marc Summers, and Jessica Richmond. Produced by Keith Corneluk and Jessica Richmond. Executive produced by Patrick James Lynch and Ryan Geelan. Post-production support from Joshua Sterling Bragg and Believe Limited. Don't forget to subscribe or follow the show on your favorite podcast player, and if you really love it, why don't you leave us a rating and a review? Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Marc Summers Unwraps.